Alright folks, are you ready to be absolutely shocked by some of the most brutal ancient torture methods in history? Get ready to dive into the dark and twisted world of ancient punishments that will send chills down your spine. Ancient torture methods were not just about inflicting pain. They were used as a form of punishment and interrogation throughout history. The extreme cruelty and creativity behind these methods showcase the darkest side of human history, revealing the depths of human cruelty. Let's delve into different brutal ancient torture methods, exploring their origins, execution, and historical significance. From the gruesome practices of the Roman Empire to the tortures used during the Spanish Inquisition, each method will make you cringe at the thought of the suffering endured by those in the past. Brace yourselves as we reveal the most shocking and brutal torture method among the 10 discussed. This key moment will leave you speechless and questioning the depths of human depravity throughout history. Brutally famous torture device in the ancient world was the rack. It involved a table, usually wooden, with axles and levers at both ends. The victim was forced to lay down, after which leather straps or belts bound their wrists and heels. The straps had chains or ropes tied to them, which wound over the axles. One or several torturers would then slowly push the levers, causing the axles to rotate and produce tension in the chains. This caused the straps to dig into the prisoner's skin and gradually stretch their body outwards. The internal physical turmoil that one would have suffered is hard to swallow. Vertebrae expanded, joints, muscles, and tendons gave way. Posture changed, the rib cage pressurized the lungs, bones shattered, nerve endings became exposed. The pain would be near unimaginable. As a bonus for these specially tough, they were placed on spiked axles that stripped their back of its flesh. In 1447, British Constable John Exeter used the rack to torture prisoners in the Tower of London. In 356 BC, the Greeks used the device to torture a Greek arsonist, Herostratus, who burnt down the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Rat torture is right up there when it comes to one of the worst ways to go. The thing about rats is that they eat through anything. Thus, it comes as no great surprise that humans made a torture device out of them in the ancient world. Typically, a rat was placed inside a small cage positioned against the victim's abdomen. The cage was heated from the outside, either by a candle, flaming stick, or hot coals, causing the rat to become agitated. So, how could it escape? By clawing its way into the only available soft surface, human skin. Quite quickly, the rat would gnaw its way into the victim's bowels, eliciting unbearable agony in the process. This technique effectively got information out of prisoners and played on their psyches, adding a psychological element to the torture. Coming in at number 1 above all other brutal ways to die in the ancient world is the Roman candle. Whether it is the execution style itself or the executioner who ordered it, this is bone-chilling on several fronts. History is filled with ruthless and psychopathic figures, and the Roman ruler, Nero, is one of them. He hated Christians so much that he used them as human candles, or torches, for his garden parties. First, the victims were tied and nailed to tall stakes. Then, flammable liquid was poured over them before they were set alight. The fire started at the feet to prolong their suffering. Whether the Christians had rebelled against the state or not, this was a monstrous way to go. It reflects how barbaric punishments were in antiquity and how they were often born of man's vicious ego and thirst to dominate what he considered a lowlier populace. At the halfway point on this list is the grotesquely graphic practice of impalement. Many civilizations and cultures practice this ancient world form of torture. It involved impaling the victim with a long, sharp, and often greased stake for either capital punishment, to subdue revolts, to reprimand defectors or wipe out military insubordination in war. This method was done in two ways, longitudinal or transversal. For longitudinal, the person was positioned above the spike, which was inserted partway up their rear privates. As gravity took hold, the spike would run them through, avoiding major organs and exiting through the skin of their shoulder or neck. A person could survive this for several days. For transversal, the stake was instead pierced through the torso, either from front to back or vice versa. Another version of impalement included gaunching, where the victim was thrown onto metal spikes, hooks, or rods and either left on them to die or be tortured further by the executioner. The almost unbelievable execution method of drinking molten gold. This was potentially practiced more often than documented, especially on both sides of the Atlantic Oceans, by the Romans and the Spanish Inquisition. The technique is self-explanatory. The victim would be restrained, and their mouth forced open as heated gold was poured down their throat. The result would be severe damage to distal organs and the blistering of the lungs, ultimately leading to immediate death. In 1599, native Indians of the Javaro tribe captured a Spanish governor and executed him by pouring liquid gold down his throat. The Roman general and politician Marcus Licinius Crassus suffered this fate when the Parthians captured him. It is alleged they did this to symbolize Crassus' thirst for wealth. Another Roman general and politician named Manius Aquilius was defeated and later executed via molten gold by Mithridates VI of Pontus. If the 5 other ancient world ways to die have not made you squirm yet, welcome to the barbaric practice of the blood eagle. Although it is highly debated whether this torture method was real or just a literary invention, either way, a rather disturbed mind concocted it. The blood eagle ritual was first mentioned in late skaldic poetry. The victim would lie in a prone position and be kept alive as their back was sliced open. Their ribs were detached from their spine, and their lungs pulled through the opening to form a pair of bloody wings. It is hard to imagine one staying conscious long enough for this to be completed. Nevertheless, if the Viking sagas are to be trusted, this technique has truly earned its spot as one of the most brutal, painful, and downright terrifying ways to die. The continuation of this spooky list is the crucifixion. This was practiced both in the ancient world and as recently as the 20th century. It was first introduced by the Assyrians and Babylonians, followed by the Persians, Alexander the Great, and the Phoenicians, who initiated it in Rome in the 3rd century BC. Crucifixion involved being tied or nailed to a wooden beam, or cross. Nails were pierced through the bones below the wrists to bear the weight of the person. It was a brilliant placement because no major blood vessels were hit, only the median nerve, which would cause the fingers to seize and the hands to flex down in an excruciating contracture. The feet were nailed to the vertical part of the cross, and once the legs weakened, the arms had to hold up the body, resulting in the shoulders being pulled from their sockets. The elbows and wrists would soon follow, with the arms now several inches longer. At this point, the chest had to bear the body's weight, triggering respiratory problems and eventual suffocation. The last one is a means of torture beyond excruciating. The wheel, also known as the execution wheel, breaking wheel, or Catherine wheel. This commonly used ruthless contraption in the ancient world was reserved for public executions. There are variations on the practice, but generally, the prisoner was tied to a large, wooden, spoked wheel. The goal was not to kill them, but severely mutilate them, with the executioner starting with breaking the leg bones and then working their way up. They would do this via an iron bar, beating the victim to near death, crushing all their bones, and bludgeoning them. Once finished, the now ghastly maimed prisoner would be repositioned on the wheel so that their heels came together at the back of their neck. They were left that way to bleed to death.